Welcome to GONKCAST, an Autechre podcast. I'm Gabe.
I'm Dan.
And this is yet another bonus episode about your emails. We normally like to pair these bonus episodes with a minor Autechre release we'd otherwise skip, but we're currently drowning in AE live sets and thought we'd keep things simple by casually discussing an increasingly popular AE meme, the possible link between Autechre and titans of 70s soft rock, Steely Dan. Think of it like a listener email from us, because we simultaneously find the comparison very funny and have no idea why it's become such a thing. First, though, I want to encourage you to write in with your comments and hot takes about AE Live. We'll be tackling all 28 and a half hours of the 2014 to 2015 tour next episode, and we want to know what you think. GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. Do you love that Autechre dumped so many soundboards on us? Wish they were more selective, maybe? Do you have a favorite set? Were you at one of these shows? We want to hear all about it. Again, GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. And thanks, by the way. I always forget to say thanks to all the people who have sent so many emails over the last months and weeks. But all right, Dan, I know we're at risk of kind of ruining the joke by talking about it, but why don't you give us the rundown on the whole Autechre Steely Dan thing?
All right. It seems to have started with a July 17th, 2020 tweet from Autechre Comments. That's at Autechre Comment on Twitter, a must follow, which reads, every Autechre fan is either A, also a Steely Dan fan, or B, is keeping their Steely Dan enthusiasm secret for some reason. That tweet inspired agreement, debate, and confusion in equal measure, but in any case, half-serious comparisons between the two have become widespread. For example, I particularly like this tweet from writer Tyler Atkinson, who says, I have just realized that the first 7 album runs of Steely Dan and Autechre parallel each other near perfectly. Can't Buy a Thrill equals Incunabula, Countdown to Ecstasy equals Amber, Pretzel Logic equals Try Repete, Katie Lied equals Chiastic Slide, The Royal Scam equals LP5, and Asia equals Confield, Gaucho equals Draft 730.
Yeah, I also like the one that singles out the A and the E on the cover of Gaucho, and the million others that claim that Autechre and Steely Dan are the same people, or that like Autechre is a side project of Steely Dan. Now, it's pretty clear how we feel about Autechre, I think, but what is your opinion of Steely Dan, Dan?
Yeah, I tweeted about it recently. I just came to like Steely Dan. I always thought that they were just like a real dad band. I've like worked at radio stations where they play it, and judging by everything else that plays and stuff, you know, I sort of just didn't like them just by where they were and everything else I knew, but I hadn't really ever listened to them other than, you know, the song, or, you know, Reel It in the Years, you know, you hear on the radio and stuff, but I was really bored with music recently, and so I was just going through stuff, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give it a chance. And
did you give it a chance because of that tweet?
Yeah, definitely. because I see so, you know, I mean, that's why I picked them out of, you know, the myriad of other things I could listen to. But yeah, I mean, I always see these tweets and stuff, and I thought, you know, what the heck, I'll give it a shot. So I listened to Can't Buy a Thrill first, and I realized, one, I knew more of the songs than I thought I did, you know, from the radio, and I liked it, you know. So I went through I haven't listened to the 2 like new albums like past Gaucho, because I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
but,
I don't think anybody really does.
But I've listened to everything, you know, up through and including Gaucho now.
Yeah, I do like that. There's like a Cousin Dupree song on the 2003 album or whatever that is kind of a groove. But I've always kind of liked Steely Dan. But in the years before the pandemic, I spent a lot of time, an increasing amount of time, like camping, boating, campfiring, like all this stuff where you're sitting around drinking beer, like listening to music. And Steely Dan became a staple of these activities, particularly when you're around, you know, like normal people who want to hear like, you know, classic rock kind of stuff. But I don't know. I've listened to every album, I mean, plenty of times, but I just find myself like thinking of them as a killer kind of singles band. That might be like heresy to some people, but like their singles, I mean, they're plentiful, the like masterpiece singles that they have. And I just think they're so good. So at least anecdotally, it seems like us two Autechre fans also are Steely Dan fans. But do you think that original tweet is true, that there is kind of a major overlap here, and why?
I mean, it's hard to know when people are joking on the internet. I mean, this probably makes me sound old, but I from reading like tweets and stuff, because the joke's been going for a while, and and it comes up often. So it seems like a lot of people are into both, but again, I'm not sure what's memeing and what's seriousness. But it seems like a lot of people are, even from like Rate Your Music and stuff. Like I see it pop up there in the comment box and stuff. It seems widespread.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I gave this a lot of thought, and there are certain. Let's say there are certain levels of connection here, I think. Like, obviously, it's a duo. It's two duos. Okay, so there's that. There's also the fact that, both are sort of considered, like, masters of tinkering. Like, I wish I could remember the who said this, but I saw a tweet that sort of noted that Steely Dan often gets accused of being, like, all head, no heart, right? The people who don't like them think of it as, I don't know, just kind of brainy or like intellectual, but just not like stimulating in the soul, I guess. And Autechre gets hit with the same exact accusation. So there's something there, you know what I mean? Like something about the kind of intellectualizing might be similar.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing I thought, and this was one of the things before I had really listened to Steely Dan, I thought it was just like a dad rock band. I didn't get that there was like, and I should have known from I know what the reference is in the name. I should have known that there was, some humor here, but I think Autechre is the same kind of thing. I think people who aren't into Autechre, think of it as just like this, beeping and booping and overly serious thing. But we talk about it all the time on the podcast, like how there seems to be a humor in it, and like from interviews and stuff, like Rob and Sean both seem, pretty funny and everything. So I think like in the same way, it kind of gets that like seriousness, but there's not, it doesn't actually exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's weird because I do feel like Steely Dan is much more about the humor than Autechre, even if there is.
Obviously, when there's lyrics, it's easier to be more upfront with it. Right. But I think like all the people I know, like in real life that like Steely Dan, they're not, I never realized, like I'm a big fan of Ween. I never realized that like Steely Dan is like proto Ween. I don't think people that are just normal people all are in on the joke. You know what I mean?
That's true. I mean, but yeah, I guess what I was going to say is like there's a little bit more humor, or a lot more humor to Steely Dan than Autechre, but there's a similar kind of critical distance. Like you just feel like when Steely Dan goes like full yacht rock or like full samba jazz or something, they're doing it like a little self-consciously, like, hey, this is our, samba section. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like, Autechre has a similar kind of critical distance, maybe, where like when they're doing acid, you don't feel like they're fully embracing the acid. They're like interrogating acid,
exactly.
And like twisting it and fucking with it. They love a groove and like an absolute slap and funk tune, but they can't just play it straight. Like they always have to completely fuck it up and twist it and, flip it on its head. There's something kind of similar going on there. I mean, And the other thing I mentioned earlier, it's like there is kind of a reputation that Steely Dan has, which is like this masters of the studio. And, it's a common thing to say that like if you're going to test a new sound system, like you should put Asia on because it's like the most perfectly mixed and mastered thing. And there's obviously that aspect of like that kind of just love of sound, love of the medium, the recording process, all of that shit in Autechre. So there's something there, and yet it's also, I want to ask, why is it funny? Because I think it's also funny because it's offensive to compare the two, like, which is weird, right? Because there are some similarities, but why is it offensive?
I think because like yacht rock and like deep electronic music are sort of the furthest things, possible, on the spectrum. And I think because like Autechre is one of the like least dad rocky kind of bands, you know, and Steely Dan. I think it's just like at a glance, before you dive deep into it, they seem like such polar opposites that makes it sort of funny,
Yeah, it's just weird because it's like, I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but like I love Steely Dan, but they also suck. I mean, I feel like they kind of suck on purpose.
No, I agree. I feel a similar way, but it's the same thing. Like I said about Ween, like a lot of like if a lot of Ween songs were just played straight, it would suck. Right. Like it's shitty, but it's the joke that's fun about it. And I feel the same way about Steely Dan. I don't particularly feel that about Autechre though. Like I don't think like anything Autechre does is shitty, but I guess like some of the sounds are like kind of funny and on their own would be stupid, like when it sounds like a crazy robot or something, or
like just springs, like, or just going nuts.
Another thing I just thought of, we've talked about how my wife hates Autechre and your girlfriend hates Autechre. I tried the Steely Dan on her in the car. That also did not go over well. So, so maybe if you hate Autechre, you'll also hate Steely Dan.
Yeah, I wonder if it works that direction too. The other funny thing about the rule is that the Autechre comments was quick to clarify is like not all Steely Dan fans.
It doesn't work opposite.
Autechre.
Yeah,
right. But all Autechre fans will dig Steely Dan. I mean. Yeah, it's something because there's a clear truth to it, but it's also like so preposterous at the same time. So I feel like we can give our official ruling that we agree. We agree with the tweet.
Yeah, it's officially accurate, I think.
Confirmed. But I do want to know what the listeners think. If you guys have any opinions on this, gonkcastpod@gmail.com. All right, let's, on that note, get into the emails. We got one from listener AT who said, I've mentioned in a previous email that Draft is probably my favorite AE release. To me, XI has a lot of similar qualities to Draft, not necessarily in the sound palette, but in its dense construction and mechanics of the tracks. The sounds on Draft are much brighter and natural sounding, for lack of a better description. Here, everything seems much more dark and mechanical. What do you think about that, the comparison between Draft and XI?
Draft is my least favorite Autechre album that we've reviewed so far. With our rankings and everything. And XI it was my third from the top. So obviously, I think of one much more highly than the other. But I can see that. Draft does kind of feel, like a bit of proto XI. I can see the seeds of XI in there, like the listener says. I mean, because even Draft, it being my least favorite Autechre album, I still don't think it's awful, or anything. So I could see. I think there's something to what the listener says.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I found myself thinking about Draft on certain tracks on XI that are like the most densely tangled, I think. Stuff like VecOS and Flep or like Prac F and stuff that's just like sort of very percussive and just like a wild tangle of percussive sounds. And yeah, I mean, I really found myself thinking about tracks like... the thing is that like on Xylem Room, to me, honestly, the more like distance we get from Draft, the more I think that like Xylem Room is just the clear highlight of Draft and like kind of represents what Draft could have been for me. Xylem Room, I think could pretty much fit on XI, if I'm being honest. It's like a nice balance. A lot of Draft, it's kind of like either totally out there and bizarre, or it's like very, very simple and just like a straightforward banger almost. Mm-hmm. And it's like, Xylem Room is maybe the one time where like the balance is perfect. And we talked all about last week how on XI, the balance is almost always perfect between like the grooves, the funk, but also like the wild sound design and just tangled density. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, I think that like XI is Draft done much, much better. It doesn't... It skirts the line between those two things like so much better, because I just thought like Draft, it was so, I don't know, it like falls so short. I think there's like excellent ideas on it and stuff. It just like falls short, and I feel like XI is where it does it. They take those same sort of ideas and run with them and make something of them that is one of my favorite records by them.
Yeah, because Draft is like pulling in two different directions, but XI synthesizes.
Exactly.
But we got another email kind of on this topic. You want to read that?
Yeah, from listener Tyler, they say, I think Draft 730 is the perfect entry point to the middle era of Autechre because it uses the deconstructive algorithmic digital structure of this period, but also has enough recognizable melodies and rhythms to give the listener an anchor. Breaking the looking ahead rule, I also think that this is the album that gives the most hints to what A.E. would do in the post-Oversteps era, with an obsession over sounds that fall between beats and pitches spread across and crunched within tracks. This is the first bit of foreshadowing to the more percussive NTS and LSEC tracks, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was thinking about this a lot because it feels like after Draft, Autechre spends a little time going other directions. You know, like I think that like Untilted and Chorustus and Oversteps are, you know, sort of like hard left turns from Draft. But it does kind of feel like they circle back around and sort of settle, starting with XI, in something much closer to Draft, kind of like we were just talking about. Do you think it's kind of a more significant turning point than maybe we gave it credit for?
Yeah, I do. I mean, again, it feels like so weird to like kind of speak so highly of it and have it so rated so lowly. But I think it is, like you said, they circle back around to these ideas. And I feel like I think like inside them somewhere, you know, I think they realized that like they were at something, you know, they were embarking on something, and they just maybe hadn't fully gotten there with Draft. Because I completely agree with the listener. I think it is like a really you know, kind of foreshadowing of the post Oversteps era, which is my favorite era of Autechre. I just think like those. I'm glad they circled back to those sorts of ideas, and maybe they personally, you know, don't think that or whatever. But you know, it just sort of feels like it. Like Draft, it's just like I don't know. It's like they weren't ready to do it all the way yet, or weren't fully committed or willing to jump, you know, that far in the deep end. I don't know what it is, but it just. I'm glad they circled back around because I feel like Draft is just sort of unfinished business. Yeah,
I like that description because it feels like, to me, an EP's worth of like incredible work.
Yeah, exactly.
And like the rest is kind of like half ideas that feel like sort of regressive or like stuff that they had already done previously. But yeah, I mean, I started to appreciate maybe that, like, if you were trying to tell the story of Autechre and you skip Draft, it would make like very little sense. Even though somehow Draft is one of my least favorite albums. All right, here's one from listener Ron, who wrote in to say that Oversteps clicked for him when he listened on speakers on a half-decent rig, adding, "It got me thinking that an undercurrent to this period when Autechre got more into digital is the improvement in digital sounds over this decade, which was exponential. The samplers on Draft just sound like mud. The Nord modular, for all its flexibility, just sandpapers your ears after a while. Everything is pretty flat. I gather that by the time of Oversteps, the guys had a proper studio setup with multi-track recording that allowed them to start thinking about sound staging." Yeah, so what do you think about that? Do you think the kind of improvements in technology contributed to this like increasing density of Autechre's sound that we've been talking about?
Oh, I'm sure. You know, I mean, obviously they seem like people who are into technology. And I mean, I think, you know, back, you know, what year did Incunabula come out? 93. 93. I don't think you could have made something that sounded like you know, XI or even Draft or anything, you know, like I mean, you would have to be like physically running, you know, like hardware. Like think of, I don't even know how you could make half the sounds, you know, that Autechre does later. So I think, you know, technology is obviously like a very like central aspect to the group.
Yeah, I mean, what I have started to appreciate doing this podcast, this like chronological walk through Autechre's discography, is that every album seems to be kind of like a reaction against what they did before. Like I used to think of Autechre as like kind of just pressing forward with every album, but now I kind of realize that it's like a left turn, a right turn, like, you know, 5 steps back, 10 steps forward, a loop-de-loop. Like it sort of moves forward, but like very roundabout way. And I kind of feel like when it comes to Oversteps, it's so clear what the reaction was against Choruses. I mean, Choruses was like recorded straight like to stereo recording, and they couldn't mess with it. And it like really must have, I mean, it must have been an exciting and inspiring challenge to them. But with like perfectionists like this, you know, it probably drove them crazy that they couldn't like go inside the sound and change things. And Oversteps just seems to be like that, you know, it's not exactly dense, but it's, you know, it's just got like so much going on, and you can tell they like went deep inside every crevice and like tinkered with it and messed with it. And that was the whole theory there. And so, yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of true. I think that in some ways they were like not using all the technology that was available to them on Chorustis sort of deliberately. And then they were like, you know what, fuck that. Let's go for it here. But it kind of, we got another email that kind of like speaks to this from the opposite direction. So you want to read that?
Yeah. In contrast to Ron, listener Richard wrote in to say that Autechre designed a lot of automation tools to achieve the screwy sounds of this middle period, and that technology started to catch up with them in the 2010s. He says before the mid to late 2000s, the average consumer wouldn't have access to either the tools or vocabulary to call them out on such things, but now they do. Software like Ableton not only gives the regular Joes the computational power to do what Autechre does, it gives them tools specifically created by engineers to copy specific tracks by Autechre and their IDM seedmates. I think this is the catastrophic singularity that AE have been dealing with ever since.
This, I think, is an absolutely fascinating point, like absolutely crucial, because we talked a lot about these sort of imperfections of XI, like the kind of rough around the edges-ness of it. And it's true that by the time of XI, like anybody could make anything, you know? It's kind of like Autechre could no longer just like push technological boundaries and get away with it, because anybody could do what they're doing in a way. And so they had to add sort of like their special talent. And I don't know, I guess this isn't totally coherent, but I kept thinking about like Burial. You know how Burial quite famously would like sort of put percussion in by hand, you know what I mean? Like sort of insert it rather than like quantizing everything and like doing it automatically. So it adds like this kind of weird like looseness to it. I just feel like XI kind of fits in that trend of like, well, what are we going to do now that every idiot can get the best technology out there, you know, very cheap? We can, you know, we no longer can just like push technology to its limits. We got to like figure out some way to stay creative. And it was like sort of by turning backwards and getting rougher, getting like embracing imperfection more. Do you get what I'm saying at all?
Yeah, it's like you have to, technology becomes like so rampant that you have to like bring humanity back into it, because, you know, anyone, I mean, the laptop I'm recording this on is better than anything, you know, they had in 1993, you know, or I mean, it was better than anything they had in, you know, 2003, you know, for draft or anything. And so with the only thing that you know, the computer isn't is the artists themselves, you know. So yeah, I mean, right. I think at some point you have to go back and rely on, you know, the humanity behind it all, and the, you know, I can't make, you know, I physically have the computing power to make something like XI, but I can't do it because I'm not talented enough, you know?
Yeah. It's just like interesting that they were kind of like not just Autechre, but I think a lot of artists were like, how do we bring imperfection back into it now that everything is so good? It's an interesting dilemma that I think Autechre handled really well. Sort of a semi, not really related comment from a listener who asked to remain anonymous that I thought was interesting. Said, regarding Blade Aloris, there is an object in Max MSP called lower res, which is a low pass resonant filter. Don't know about the Blade bit though. So does that mean it's like Blade low res?
Oh, yeah. Smart. I don't know what the Blade means, but who knows? Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. But it's very typical, I think, that they're always, you know, you always see like these little things added into the name. It's just like whatever effect or whatever thing they were using. All
like the RSD 10 thing or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Just wanted to read that. Okay, an actually related comment from listener Tyler here. On the subject of playing with mediums, I think EP7 is an interesting case because viewing it as a celebration of the CD makes a lot of sense with the cover art, the hidden track at the beginning, and the overall shift to a digital sound. On the other hand, the sounds on EP7 are so dirty and imperfect, less like a precise digital file and more like someone using a crappy microphone to record someone else playing the album on a boombox or something. The phenomenon brings to mind Aphex Twin selected ambient works, which suffers from a sound quality problem. I think the reduced quality is intentional and meant to serve as a purpose in exploring the medium and changing the environment that the record creates. I think EP7 does the same thing in intentionally damaging the sound. Any thoughts on this? Does it jive with or contradict your view of EP7 as an exploration of the sonically perfect CD medium?
Yeah. I could see that. I mean, it makes sense to, when you have this like sonically perfect medium to not go sonically, to use that to, dirty it up or whatever. That's interesting. I didn't think of that when we were, listening to EP7, but it makes a lot of sense, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it is very like of the CD and seems to be really like self-consciously a CD, but I do think that there's a lot of dirtiness, a lot of glitchiness, but I've always thought of it as like distinctly digital glitchiness on that release in particular. I mean, it reminds me of, I guess it doesn't really sound like it, but it's got like a palette, something like Oval's work from around the same period. And I just started thinking like, I mean, it really is the flip side, the companion to LP5, which is like a brand new CD right out of the case. And then EP7 is like the CD that's all scratched after a couple of years,
banging around in your backpack or whatever. Yeah,
I was thinking about that. While I was thinking about this question, I was remembering I had a friend, and he would just like throw his CDs like straight into his backpack. Did you ever know anybody like that?
No, I probably, because do I know the person you're?
Yeah, you do.
Okay, well, so then but I didn't know that.
I was just like, what the fuck are you doing? And maybe he was an aspiring Autechre fan.
God, that's
imperfection. All right, what's next?
All right, from listener Joe, he says, when you guys discussed the results of the Reddit Survivor thing, you were surprised that Tri Repete got voted out so early, and your theory was that people have played it so many times that they've worn it out and haven't worn out some of the newer albums. I don't think that's necessarily the case, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I think you guys are a bit biased towards Tri Repete. You've both mentioned that this was the first AE album that you've really connected with, and I think that everyone feels a deep connection with the first album that really got them into Autechre.
Yeah, I had to do some soul searching on this. I mean, I think Joe could be right, but I don't think it's the fact that Tri Repete was like the first one that made me fall in love with Autechre. I think it's just that like Tri Repete kind of towers over 90s electronic music, just objectively, right? Like that's not just me. It's just like an absolute classic on the Mount Rushmore of 90s electronic music. And for some reason, like when you're my age, and I think Joe is a similar age based on like conversations we've had over email, but when you're my age, how it like always feels like the 90s were like last decade, no matter how much time passes.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was thinking like at this point, it doesn't make any fucking sense anymore, but it still feels like the 90s just sort of like towers over this period. And it feels like I was thinking of Radiohead, right? Like if you're my age, you always go, like every time you hear something by Radiohead, you think like, okay, but is it as good as like OK Computer and Kid A? Because those were like the big ones, you know what I mean? They like tower over everything. And you forget that like 20 something years have passed since OK Computer. And like for a whole new generation, or just not even younger people, but people who like got into Radiohead later, something like In Rainbows is like that's like their towering one or something like that. So, you know what I'm saying? It's like, for some reason, Tri Repete and like the 90s work just seems to be like the metric by which everything is measured. Although I recognize that it's been so long that no longer makes sense.
Yeah, I basically completely agree with you. I mean, I do like Tri Repete a lot. And yeah, I do, probably have some connection with it being like the, first album I got into, but really I got into it because like you're saying, like I was getting into electronic music, and this was just like a record that, towered in the scene of IDM and stuff that, I wasn't like necessarily trying to get into Autechre. I was just checking out, electronic music, and it's such a like an important album that it was on the list, that I was going through, right, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's a super, boomer thing. And if you're a younger fan, and maybe electronic music's always like we always talk about it, in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, like electronic music became like kind of mainstream and stuff. But before then, it was like sort of something like you had to search out, or like, I guess if you're old enough to go to clubs at the time, maybe they were playing it, but, it wasn't like such a ubiquitous thing. I mean, honestly, like Tri Repete was like probably one of the first like electronic things that I ever enjoyed. So I mean, maybe that doesn't help my case against it just being pure nostalgia, but I think it's just I think if you're younger and you may be getting into it now, that Tri Repartee maybe doesn't have that like that quality of towering above not only Autechre but just like electronic music in general, Yeah.
I mean, we got some biases, but I still believe that if you ask any like normie, and by normie I mean somebody like they still know Autechre, but they're sort of a normie, they would say like, Tri Repartee is the Autechre classic. I still think that's true. All right, listener Brian wrote in to say, I'm shocked there were no emails highlighting Deco Lock. In fact, I refrained from emailing about it because I was betting that several other people would. Anyway, it's such a standout on XI for me. It sounds like nothing else they've ever made, and the way that smooth vocal sample clips and grooves, it just never gets old. Likewise, listener Tyler wrote, I was a little surprised that Deco Lock didn't get much chatter because the way vocal samples are used is so different from vocal samples in other Autechre tracks. He adds, they alternate between using the sample as percussion and as a melody, and the way they do so is brilliant. It gives the entire track the feeling of having a catchy melody, but there really is very little of a melody at all. It's a trippy illusion. I know Dan has had misgivings about AE vocal samples in the past, so I'm curious what his take is on this one. I guess we didn't talk about Deco Lock. There's so many tracks on XI that I wish like we could spend a whole hour just gushing about, but what do you make of the prominent vocal samples here?
I have bitched about those in the past, but I don't mind. I don't mind them on Deco Lock. I tend to like it. The ones I bitched about the most, I think, are like the ones that are like very apparent or just really upfront. Like very obviously just like a clipped, sentence or something. Here I think they're like melded in much better, and maybe you could even miss it if you weren't paying attention. That it was vocal. I think basically from. I can't remember what the last one had a vocal sample, but around this period on, I don't think they ever use a vocal sample like in a shitty way again. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's pretty obviously a vocal, but they do start to use it like a synth or something where it like becomes melodic, it becomes like lush. I mean, and you like the vocals on CSEC on EP7, right? That like chopped up rapping.
Yeah, I do. Basically, you'll come to learn that I'm a hypocrite, and I spout nonsense. Yeah,
but I just mean that, like, to me, like the way vocals are used here does kind of remind me of CSEC, and yet it's even like more diverse because they do get like sort of chopped up in a weird rhythmic way, but then they turn into like pure melody.
I think it's just it's using it more as like a instrument or like a melodic thing instead of like. In some, I wish I could think of one off the top of my head that's a negative, but when it's just like used as like literal vocals, I don't like that as much. Yeah, but when it's used in a melodic kind of way, I don't mind that. And in fact, I think that there's like it could be like very inventive and stuff. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but I think there's something on AE Live at points that I'm not sure if it's a vocal or something, and we can save it for that episode and stuff. But I think that there's ways to use vocals that are more interesting than they had in the past.
Yeah. I mean, and just for the record, I think Deco Lock is absolutely awesome. It reminds me of like a Clams Casino track at points that was kind of hot at this time, but it's like taken to a whole nother like absolutely abstract level. I'm also very intrigued by like in the Ask Autechre Anything, for some reason I think Sean is like he keeps like sort of hinting like I'm waiting for people to figure out what the sample is on Deco Lock, and somebody guesses like David Bowie, which I thought was such a good fucking guess because it sounds so much like David Bowie at one point, but he says no. But to my knowledge, nobody has figured it out. So if any listeners have a guess, I'd love to hear it. GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. All right, what's next?
All right, listener Jordan says, you said you like hearing listeners' funny Autechre stories, and because it's XI next week, I thought I'd share this. I don't know if it is that funny, but I used to think that the album cover for XI was a QR code, and that if you scanned it, it would link to something cool, to a secret music video or something. I took my phone and tried to scan it, and nothing happened. So I asked on the subreddit why the QR code wouldn't work, and I was told that it wasn't a QR code at all. I was kind of disappointed because it would have been cool if it was. I think I said on the episode that I think
Yeah.
it looks like a QR code. So, you're not stupid.
Yeah, I just love that he went as far as like
asking, scanning it.
What's
So
wrong?
scanning it. I could see trying that, but thinking your phone was the problem. That is funny.
Yeah. On a related note, listener Tyler shared his interpretation of where the letters E, X, A, and I are on the XI cover. We talked about this, like not being able to see it. Do you see it now, Dan?
Yeah, I did. Thanks for that. It makes sense. I can't remember if it was on Twitter or the AE subreddit. Somebody sent or showed me the L event does the same thing and how it's spelled out. I should have sent it to you, but I could see both now. It's a little,
Yeah,
you got to put a little imagination in it, but I could see it.
Yeah, I mean, what's weird is that there's a bunch of extra shapes, it seems like, that are not part of the letter forms. But, it's all right. It's cool as like a little Easter egg, but I still kind of like it more as just like this totally abstract, like, what is this weird series of shapes?
Yeah, I agree.
All right. A couple quick influence comments. We got listener David, for example, wrote, is it just me or does TSXI sound like an ode to 1990s Mouse on Mars? I'm hearing some very similar sounds and textures that are reminiscent of the German duo's early work. I'm not sure I can explain it, but after reading this, I honestly do hear it and I can't unhear it. So I just wanted to shout that out. Listener Darren wrote, I always thought that Rexon was a nod to Scorn. I remember around the time of XI, Sean stated that he admired the work of Mick Harris, and this track felt like an expression of that, at least in the first half anyway. I haven't actually listened to Scorn, maybe I should, but I did notice that Sean was asked that exact question in the Ask Autechre Anything and said, nah, Rexon is an 80s hip-hop homage. That emu snare is on loads of hip-hop records and the booming 808, etc. More of a shout-out to Meat Beat, Manifesto, Renegade, Soundwave, Keith LeBlanc, Duke, Booty, etc. But I can see why someone who doesn't really listen to 80s hip-hop but listens to Scorn might think that. So I know not everybody spends as much time like scouring the Ask Autechre Anything as I do, so I just thought I would share that little nugget. What's next?
All right, listener Jordan says, in the last episode, you were talking about how L Event fits in with the album if you approach them as EPs. You could think of L Event as a detour, like a bonus world or side quest in a video game. Think of the different sections of XI like chapters in a book, and L Event could be a spin-off chapter. XI is the type of album that laughs in the face of rockism by punishing people who listen to the whole 2 hours, so you only thought you listened to whole albums. Try this. That seems directed at me.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to ask you about that separately. I actually really like the idea of L Event as like a detour or some kind of bonus world, because it's like you could kind of do it at any time and it's sort of like a side story, right? So maybe it doesn't have to, like, we don't have to find the exact spot where it fits in to the like progression of XI, but any point you want to like take a detour into a slightly different world or a road untraveled, I do kind of like that. But yeah, I was kind of curious about that second part. Like, do you think that Autechre is kind of taunting us with the length of XI? Because we talked a lot about how it's kind of like they were very kind to divide it into sides, like discs of vinyl, and yet they really didn't publicize those instructions anywhere. I didn't even know about it until I started researching for our episode that you're not supposed to listen to the whole thing in 1 2-hour chunk. So what do you think of that?
And the fact that the vinyl only exists in one singular pressing, so most people don't even have it in that way. I don't know. I know like the band said it themselves, but like you said, it's not like they advertised it too much. So I also didn't know that until you told me. So it's sort of like, I think if they were really trying to, buck the idea of like an album, you would make it more well known that you weren't supposed to listen to it as an album. I guess maybe they thought just most people wouldn't maybe sit through a 2-hour album or whatever, but
yeah,
damn it, I will. So I have.
I think I've just decided that as a rule, like, Autechre doesn't taunt. Like, maybe this is just me, but I just feel like they're very kind. Like, they release like, challenging stuff, but they like want you to enjoy yourself. I think like I just feel like that's them.
It's almost like anthropomorphizing, because like we don't really know them or anything, but I feel the same kind of way. Like we've had emails and stuff where people say like, oh, they're making fun, and I never get the sense that they're like, as the Brits say, taking the piss out of people.
Right.
I feel like they genuinely just like making this kind of music, and like you said, they want the listener to have a good time. It never seems like they're being purposely like difficult or anything.
Yeah, and I feel like when they release really long projects, they're like, I hope you have fun. Like, listen however the fuck you want. Like, they're not like trying to kill you or crush you under the weight of it or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, here's another one from listener Tyler. Do you think you'll do a discussion on the EPs collection as a whole at some point? I know you've discussed all the EPs on it individually already, but the collection itself has some merit. Hearing the EPs chronologically all at once is eye-opening because it gives the clearest picture of the band's early evolution. When you listen to those EPs in order, the big leaps that their discography seems to make actually don't feel that big anymore. The evolution is pretty sensible, actually. I'd be really curious to hear you compare the tracks across EPs to one another. If you have to rank the top 10 tracks in the collection, how would you rank them? I kind of want to bring this up to just sort of like, I don't know, ask you if you think this is worth like an extended discussion, like on a bonus episode, or you think it's just something we can talk about now. Like, do you think the EPs box set works on its own, like as some kind of whole thing?
I think it is a pretty interesting question because, we've talked about it as we went through a lot of these EPs. We were mostly familiar with some of them, like because of this box set and in the context of this box set. So I think, it was nice to look at them, separately as their own thing, as we already did. But I think it would be interesting to look at it as a, full box set, probably not until, we're done with all the, main albums and stuff. And we're just hitting, the stuff we missed or whatever. But I think it'd be, at least pretty interesting. Yeah,
we could maybe do it. I mean, as I was sort of looking at it, I was thinking like, the issue is that it goes chronologically, right? And it actually sort of neatly divides so that it's not like splitting things up apart from EP7, which I guess was intentional because EP7 was originally released as two separate things on vinyl. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I mean, it doesn't feel like it was arranged in any other way than chronologically. And some EPs, when I think about them, are like work really well as like nice, tightly little constructed things. You know what I mean? Like Sickly Sweet is like this perfect little suite of music, or Gans Graph, all those tracks like lift each other up. Whereas others just feel more like assortments, like the Peel sessions, for example. But I don't know. I just kind of feel like, I don't know if I agree. I feel like if you listen to this as one collection, it makes some pretty wild shifts and doesn't like reveal some logical growth. I feel like also, though, if you put all of Autechre's albums on a like one single box set, you would also feel like it's absolutely schizophrenic the way it's like jumping around, Yeah. I think you're right there. Yeah. All right. Well, so maybe we'll table that and come back to it later on. Another kind of similar question from listener Eric, who says, I just wanted to make sure y'all don't miss out on hearing the XI Japanese bonus track. It's a good one, beautiful and tranquil. It's actually one of my faves of the XI era. Just wanted to mention this because we are going to talk about all the Japanese bonus tracks. We got this idea, like after we get through the discography, to do something like ranking every Japanese bonus track, but we will definitely talk about them. What's next? All right, last one from listener AT. They say, whenever you get to the end of this podcast, have you considered trying to get Rob and or Sean on the show for the final episode? That would be the ultimate climax for this podcast if you could arrange that somehow. That's funny. I was honestly just the other day, and I hadn't read this email because I'm lazy and I don't read most of the emails, but I was thinking like I should look up like do they have like a publicist or whatever? It just said, see what happens. But, I doubt they do it. They, but yeah, shoot your shot. Yeah, we'll try it. We'll try it. Shoot or shoot. We'll try it. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's right. All right, well, that's it. I mean, if you didn't hear your question today, we got like a couple more that were really awesome, but we're probably going to save it. We got too many good ones this week, as you can see from this super long bonus episode. Always longer than we intend, but we will get to them.
All right. Well, if you've got any Autechre opinions, hot takes you want to share, we want to hear them. GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. Next episode in about a week. AE live, all 28 hours. Again, send us your thoughts about that. GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. If you like the show, help us out by subscribing. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Look us up on YouTube. Stay connected to Twitter and Instagram. Those are @GONKCASTpod, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.